or morning, wherever you are in the world. Yes, Makai, I'm talking to you. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you today about the actual field of positive psych, what it is, and more importantly, what it is not. I was going to do that last week, but thought with the timing of American Thanksgiving, it was more appropriate to talk about gratitude. So today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to what positive psychology is and all of the goodness around it. So to start, positive psychology has been around as a field of study for about 30 years. It's a subfield of psychology, and it's a scientific study of optimal human functioning that allows both people and organizations or communities to thrive. Positive psych as a field focuses on strengths instead of weaknesses. It focuses on building up the good in life and repairing the bad, but having a balance there of building up the good and repairing the bad. You can hold both in tandem. And this field takes the life of average people, those average Joes, you could say, and helps them live a life of flourishing, get them from languishing to thriving, instead of just moving people from depression or some sort of mental illness up to neutral. So if you could picture a number line, you could imagine my forearm here is a number line. Here is about the neutral spot on 0. Traditional psychology normally looks at someone and takes them from mental illness, like say someone who is depressed or has clinical anxiety, right? Hanging out at like a -10, -9 down here. A traditional psychologist, in a sense, would see that as an issue, obviously, and bring them up to neutral, where they're just kind of languishing. They're not necessarily depressed anymore, but they're not really happy either. At this point, because their psychopathology, their symptoms are gone, a traditional psychologist would look at that and say, okay, my job here is done, there's no more issues, so what else is there to work on? But positive psychology raises the question of, well, why can't you go further? Why can't you raise the level of happiness or of life to a higher ceiling? So positive psychology takes people from languishing to north of neutral, if you will. And positive psychology is, in the sense, you could sum it up really nicely with the phrase, the absence of depression is not happiness, and likewise, the absence of anxiety is not calm or serenity. So, in other words, like I kind of just said, just because a person isn't depressed doesn't necessarily mean they're happy. And just because a person's not suffering from anxiety doesn't necessarily mean they're cultivating calm or mindfulness in their everyday. To put it further, if you're not, just because you're not unhealthy doesn't mean you're healthy. My point is, there's a gap there that positive psychology addresses. And to illustrate this further a little bit, if you were to picture a continuum, right? So on one side you have premature death, which is like the disease model, the illness model of where our medical system currently lies. On the other side, you have high level wellness. So that's having a sense of meaning, purpose, vitality, self-awareness, positive emotion, meaningful relationships, all of that yummy stuff on this side. This illness wellness continuum, and where positive psychology comes into play, takes people from this neutral point up to self-awareness, which leads to education, which leads to growth, which keeps you in this realm of high-level wellness, of a life of flourishing. Likewise, on this side of premature death, you might have signs of an illness and then symptoms of that illness, which leads to potentially a disabling disease or mental illness. So picturing this continuum here, positive psychology takes people who are in this neutral point, having signs and maybe some symptoms of a mental illness, and provides them tools to cultivate self-awareness, education, empowerment to kind of take their life, their mental health, their autonomy back into their own hands, which is a really powerful thing when you think about it. Something that I've been playing around with as far as where positive psychology fits into my personal and professional lives. So learned helplessness is this idea, this thought pattern that someone can have, that nothing they do in life matters. Nothing, no effort they make, nothing they do will make a difference or push the needle in any way. So what's the point of even trying? What's the point of giving effort? Nothing I do in life matters anyway. That can lead to depression. That leads to rumination, you recycling thoughts and focusing, getting really critical and judgment of yourself. That can lead to depression. There's a linkage there. And in our traditional medical model, when you have that learned helplessness, and potentially if you're depressed, you go to see a psychotherapist or a counselor and you're looking for them for the answers, when really you could flip the coin and gather the tools and information to look inside yourself, to get out of that loop of helplessness. If you're looking to someone else and that counselor or therapist is fulfilling that role, that cycle of learned helplessness, I'm helpless, I can't do this alone, nothing I do matters, so here I'm going to talk to someone else, they're going to fix it for me. That's just perpetuating that cycle of learned helplessness, and it might help someone ease their qualms or help them through that rough patch or whatever it is they're experiencing, but it may not actually fix the source of the learned helplessness, ruminating thoughts in their mind. So just some food for thought that this idea of positive psychology, giving people the tools and the information to help them strike a healthy balance and mental health within themselves. So the theoretical framework is a fancy word for model or guide, you could say, for the field of positive psychology, because it is based in science. It's called PERMA, but notably, a student of Martin Seligman, he's one of the founding fathers of positive psychology, she added V to the model to represent vitality. So the model that I like to use when talking about positive psychology is actually PERMA V. The P in PERMA stands for positive emotion. That's cultivating joy, resilience, optimism, gratitude, all of that good stuff. The E stands for engagement, which means getting into flow states, cultivating a sense of mindfulness, increasing your self-regulation, and increasing savoring. R is relationships. That's all about high-quality connections and a sense of altruism. M is meaning, which is basically making meaning and purpose in your life, connecting yourself to something larger than you. The A in PERMA V is achievement. That has to do with goal setting, healthy habits, and visualization. And the V in vitality represents sleep, nutrition, cultivating a physiological sense of calm, the mind-body connection, and positive sexuality as well. So with all of this information, I hope that you've gathered that positive psychology is in fact a scientific field of study. There is evidence to support the theories and the practices in this subfield of positive psych. But I want to review some myths with you, because I think positive psychology as a name, face value, can get a bad rap. Actually, Seligman says that he regrets coining the field positive psychology because of all the flack and the pushback that, or the judgments, I guess, that he's gotten from that name, because of these misconceptions. So the first myth is that positive psychology is a happyology. And that's just not true. In the same vein, another myth is that positive psychology completely ignores negative emotion. When in reality, positive psychology is a field that gives you the tools to work with negative emotions, to navigate through those hard times, and to also help increase the positive emotion in your life. It gives people the tools to experience the full range of human emotion. It's recognizing, appreciating, and accepting the fact that as a human in this weird, messy, complex world that we live in, it's a good thing to feel the full gamut of emotion, whether it's positive or negative. And it allows us the permission to be human and embrace the imperfection and the messiness of life. Another myth is that it's a self-help movement. That's just not true. It's a scientific field of study. Another myth is that it's just about positive thinking. I like to say that, no, we're not all just standing around a fire holding hands singing Kumbaya. We're actually putting this evidence-based information and practice into practice. And another myth, and something that I think is very important, is that positive psychology treats psychological disorders. That's not true. Positive psych is a descriptive science, not a prescriptive science. it just helps us show up in the world the way that we want to. Could you use positive interventions in tandem with psychotherapy? Absolutely. And there's evidence to support that things like gratitude interventions are actually extremely helpful paired with something like medication or psychotherapy. But standing alone, it's not an appropriate tool for someone who has a psychological disorder. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the field of positive psychology. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments about anything I said, feel free to write me in the message box, messenger, or put a comment on the video. But I hope this was insightful. See y'all soon.